DCV is an encrypted pixel streaming technology from AWS that lets you connect servers in the cloud or a traditional on-premises data center with a client on your Mac or PC. But it does this using some really cool tricks that make it hard to tell that you're not standing in the data center next to the server with the air conditioning blowing up your leg. This was critical technology in supercomputing because visualizing the massive data sets coming from HPC clusters was a really unpleasant activity if you had to be close to the machine. But it's when you have more than one user and probably more than one resource you want to share, well, that's when it gets tricky. Matching a client and a server may involve decisions about who should have access to what kind of desktops among different environments or using different operating systems.
With the release of the DCV Access Console, that's where we're making things a lot easier. They have all the components they need to build these things out of the box and provide it to their end users.
So today we're going to tell you the story of DCV Access Manager, and we're going to do it in two parts. First, we'll give you a refresher of what DCV can do and thus what DCV Access Manager can configure and deliver.
You may have certain business units that need a mix of Windows and Linux. You can specify which distribution of Linux they need, or Windows has a GPU, has this much memory.
And then we'll walk you through the UI of Access Manager so you can see for yourself how easy it is to use. We'll split this into two shows. If you want to see the demo, just skip to the end of this one and you'll see a link to that video. But for now, let's explain what this thing does.
As you said, we've seen a lot of value to customers where they're putting compute in remote locations and they need to stream it in a local-like experience as if that hardware was directly on the end user's desk. DCV fits well there, but the one main thing is when you start to scale this to many users, it isn't as much of just a direct connection anymore. So if it's an isolated network environment that needs to be completely locked down, we start to implement things like gateways and external authentication tokens. All of this can make things more complex, and that's where our broker called DCV Session Manager comes into play, because ultimately that can be a centralized point that exposes an API for administrators to manage DCV sessions at scale. End users don't know how to interact with this component, ultimately meaning that this customer or this business needs to build a front-end UI framework to do all of the communication to the broker. And we've listened to this feedback, and that's ultimately why we developed the DCV Access Console. This allows administrators to essentially have an end-to-end solution just using DCV-based technologies.
Access Console is something that you like much like all the other components of DCV. I mean, it's designed to be assembled by a DevOps team and then deployed and given access to end users to be able to use to manage and modify their sessions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we've always been really focused on builders. And one thing that we found is even, infrastructure builders may not have an aligned web development team to build invest substantial time into a front-end UI framework. So this was really the last piece of the puzzle that we've seen is if we can give a front-end UI framework, we already have a high-performance display protocol. We already have a broker that can manage all of your sessions at scale. We just need to visualize it in the right way that makes sense to end users. And that's really what we solved with the Access Console. And we did build it in such a way that you can customize the architecture of it and really implement it in a way that makes the most sense for your business.
You mean that my customers can actually steal this thing and shortcut to the end and not actually write a lot of code? They can steal your code.
That's the goal of it. Absolutely. We want to save them time on implementing DCV-based solutions.
We have a theme for the HPC recipe library, which is stand on the shoulders of someone else. I think it's just called leveraging. Anyway, this is good. All right, cool. So who's going to be, I guess the people who are going to be most interested in this are definitely going to be folks, going to be DevOps teams in companies that have got a visualization need. But in particular, it's going to be people with slightly more complex needs, not just one client or one server, but many clients, many servers.
It's just once you start to scale that out, that's inherently all architectures start to get more complicated as you start to add more and more compute or just overall volume to that architecture. With the release of the DCV Access Console, that's where we're making things a lot easier for administrators because they have all the components they need to build these things out of the box and provide it to their end users. And with the flexibility that's already within the broker that we have of DCV Session Manager, you can be extremely flexible with how you provide that compute to your end users. So you may have certain business units that need a mix of Windows and Linux that you can specify which distribution of Linux they need, or Windows has a GPU, has this much memory, maybe shared compute so that you can, stand up a single instance and have multiple users use it and even share the underlying GPU. These are things that we've made much easier just through the UI provided through DCV Access Console, because administrators can just create what that end user is supposed to need. And we'll show this in the demo, but ultimately the end user is just saying, create my session, and then they have direct access to that environment the administrator created for them.
So that's actually a key thing that we probably should call out that a lot of folks won't know is kind of a frequent use case for DCV, which is that you can have a single EC2 instance, single machine, and with a great GPU in it, and then actually have 10 different sessions running on there. 10 different people who all think that they have a machine sitting there in the cloud data center doing their bidding, but completely unaware that they're sharing that machine with 9 other people. It's actually a really cool way to use DCV, because a lot of folks use DCV so that they can get punchy remote visualization desktop to a server in a data center that's connected to a bunch of stuff securely, so that data that the end users are working on never actually leaves the data center, never leaves the cloud. Mm-hmm. Even though it looks like it's there on a user's desktop, it's not. It's just pixels, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, we're just streaming encrypted pixels, and we give a lot of different mechanisms for administrators to lock down which permissions that end user is supposed to have. So for instance, if they try to screenshot PII that's in session, we'll blank out the screenshot. They can't copy and paste, things like that. But going back to the shared compute, I mean, it's great for cost optimization for customers already running AWS. They have the full variety of what EC2 provides, but they may find certain applications don't need that entire GPU assigned to it. So that's when, splitting multiple users onto that single host and getting the most out of it can really help them in terms of from a cost standpoint.
Cheap, fast, and secure.
Exactly.
You don't have to pick 2. That's really cool. All right. The last thing, I think there was an interesting thing that you said. There's a lot of controls in DCV to actually enable or disable features of the DCV client. So, you sort of called out one, which is, screenshot prevention, if the administrator wanted to enforce that. But you could also go the other way, and you could actually allow people to do some things like for example, authenticating with a key fob card, or plugging in a thumb drive, copying and pasting between applications and a local desktop into DCV. Those are all features that are available in DCV, right?
Exactly, yeah. And again, all of these have super granular permissions. So one thing we recently released is WebAuthn redirection. So historically, we've seen customers want to use WebAuthn just to align to their security posture. But historically, you've had to redirect that whole USB device, meaning it's not available on the client-side machine anymore. So we're always looking at different features that we can add to natively redirect that communication securely. So again, like all of these have specific permissions, but out of the box, the administrator gets to decide, which features to enable to align to whatever requirements that they have.
There's a lot of creature comforts in DCV, which makes it easy for an admin to provide an experience to their end users where the distance and complexity of what's going on just disappears into the background, so they can believe the experience is, well, as good as being local. I should point out that our other product, Research and Engineering Studio, uses all this cool tech to create a nice, curated environment for R&D users like scientists and engineers, the usual sort of nerds we work with in HPC. Now, Res is a more opinionated way to get users running in the cloud, and those opinions are formed by working with those nerds for a lot of years. DCV Access Manager is for those folks who have different and much more general needs, and it's less finished or complete, which gives you, the DevOps team, the ability to decide how the finishing and completeness is done, so you can tailor the whole thing to the way your place works. Thankfully, most places aren't R&D labs. I don't want to imagine the chaos if a bank ran like a nuclear physics lab. Anyway, that's it for the talking bit. Let's see the demo and show you what this looks like from both the end user's point of view and from the admin's cockpit, where they control what the experience looks like.